Good evening and welcome to this planning subcommittee meeting here at George Meehan House. My name is Barbara Blake, I'm the chair of this committee. If we can have introductions from the members please, starting on my left.
Reg Rice, Councillor for Tottenham Hale.
George Dunstall, Councillor for Stroud Green.
Yvonne Say, Councillor for White Hart Lane.
Lester Buxton, Councillor for Crouch End.
Mark White, Councillor for Tottenham Central.
Ajda Ovett, Councillor for Northumberland Park.
Councillor Luke Colley-Harrison, Crouch End.
Thank you. And if the officers can introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Good evening, Matthew Barrett from Legal Services.
Rob Shasovsky, Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability.
Robbie McKnocker, Head of Development Management.
Chris Smith, Principal Planning Officer.
John McWilby, Major Applications Team Leader.
Elisabetta Tonazzi, Principal Conservation Officer.
And Fiona Ray, Acting Committees Manager, Clerk to the Committee.
Thank you. And Councillor Bartlett is on her way, but stuck somewhere, I think, between Lancashire and Wood Green. But she's on her way, I hope. And some officers are in attendance virtually, and they will introduce themselves when relevant. So this meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. And we're on to item 2, which is the planning protocol. Members and speakers are requested to note the information set out at item 2 on the agenda. And we have apologies for absence have been received from Councillor John Bevan, and Councillor Cathy Brennan is in attendance as a substitute, so welcome, Councillor Brennan, and also apologies from Councillor Worrell. And there are no items of urgent business. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest? No. So we're on to item 6, which is the minutes. So to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th, 11th and 21st of July 2022. Are these approved? Yes? Right, thank you. So we are now on to the Broadwater Farm Estate, which is 0823, and the proposal which is set out in the agenda pack, so I won't read that out. So the recommendation for this application has been amended in the addendum of the report. So I'll now hand over to Robbie McKnocker to update on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members will note that as set out in the main report, page 44, paragraph 3.2, that the Government Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport was considering the listing of the mural attached to the Tangmere block. As set out in the addendum published today, the mural attached to the Tangmere block has now been listed as Grade 2, and the officer's recommendation has been revised to recommend that this item is deferred to allow consideration of the impact of the proposal on this heritage asset.
Thank you. So, as the mural attached to Tangmere block has now been Grade 2 listed, and the officer recommendation is now to defer, I propose that we move to defer the application to provide additional time to consider and address the material change in circumstances arising from the recent listing of the mosaic mural on the Tangmere building. So, is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Say.
I'll second that.
Councillor Say seconded. Councillor Rice. Thank you very much. Okay, so those in favour of that, please show. That's everybody. That's everyone. Okay, right. Thank you very much. So thank you, and apologies to those that have attended the meeting for this item. Details will be communicated to all those registered to receive updates, and that can be checked with the Democratic Services. So thank you for coming. I'm sorry that you've had a journey. Okay, so just checking to see if our councillor Bartlett is outside. Right, okay, so can we just have 2 minutes there? Everybody stay where they are, please.
Apologies. While we're waiting, is there any chance that we could just have an idea of when the item that we just deferred is likely to return to this committee?
If I could just take that, Chair. It's not certain at the moment. It's targeting December as a potential option. There's time needed to prepare a report from a heritage consultant on the applicant's side for the submission of a list of building consent, then consultation on that, which is 3 weeks, and then consideration of that and presentation to committee in terms of deadlines. So that does seem to be achievable for in time for a publication for December. But there does also need to be consideration given to the approach to the mural, whether it can be retained, how that would work. All of that is really up in the air at the moment. So you can imagine that there's a bit of work to be done, but on paper, December is the target at the moment.
So, welcome to Councillor Bartlett. Do you have any declarations of interest, Councillor? Yeah. No. Okay, thank you. So we're now moving on to item 10. This is 313 The Roundway and 8 to 12 Church Lane, N17, and the reference number is 0967. So the proposal, which is in the pack, and the recommendation for this is to grant. So if I hand over to Christopher Smith, who's going to introduce this application. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just 1 second. The presentation's just loading. Okay, sorry about that one. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This application is for the development of 313 The Roundway and 8 to 12 Church Lane. Planning permission is sought for the demolition of existing buildings and erection of a 3 to 5 storey building with new Class E / F1 floor space at ground floor and residential C3 units with landscaping and associated works. So the proposed development includes a demolition of existing buildings, 3 to 5 storey development, 76 new homes, 21% of which would be affordable housing by habitable room. 63% of the affordable housing would be for affordable rent, so that is 8 units, and 37% of the affordable housing would be in shared ownership, which is 5 units. There are 12% 3-bedroom units, which is 9 of the total. 80% of the units would be dual aspect. 10% of them will be wheelchair user dwellings. There are 4 on-street blue badge parking spaces, on-site play and communal amenity space, a new east-west public route through the site, and significant public realm improvements. So the site is an angular plot of land located between the Roundway to the west and Church Lane to the east. It's the mostly vacant and derelict site that has been a visual blight in the local area for a long period of time. The site has a fragmented land ownership, which increases the complexity of land assembly. So the image on that screen as well, with the coloured land parcels, shows the fragmented land ownership. It is mostly surrounded by low-rise, non-residential properties, and residential properties in the wider area are generally 2 or 3 stories in height. The area has a complex heritage context, which is described further on the next slide. So this slide shows the heritage context in more detail. Here you can see that the application site is partially within the Bruce Castle Conservation Area. The Peabody Cottages Conservation Area is located to the west. There's the Grade 1 Bruce Castle Museum and Tower shown to the east of the site in green. And there are several locally listed buildings around the site, including the locally listed nursery to the north, the Elmhurst Public House to the south, and Risley Avenue Primary School to the northwest. So the site is located centrally within site allocation SA63, which has been identified for mixed residential and employment uses. The site allocation also requires an east-west route to be provided through the site. The site allocation also requires that development should respect Bruce Castle Museum and Park. These images show the appearance of the existing site from the Roundway, Lordship Lane and Church Lane. On the Roundway frontage and turning the corner into Lordship Lane, the development will be 4 stories in height plus a recessed roof level. On Church Lane, the development will be 3 stories in height, stepping up to 4 stories. An indicative master plan, shown in the inset image, has been submitted with the application, which shows how the development will be incorporated into a comprehensive redevelopment proposal for the whole of the site allocation, SA63, in the future. As such, this development complies with the master planning requirements of policy DM55. So the applicant has undertaken a detailed analysis that reviews how the development would appear in key views within the local heritage context. Here the development is shown on the left of this image in views of Bruce Castle from the junction of Bruce Grove and Lordship Lane. Once the site allocation is fully developed, the western elevation of this building, the eastern elevation of this building, will be significantly screened from this viewpoint. This image shows how the development would appear from the junction of Lordship Lane and the Roundway. The development will bring increased activity onto this junction through new ground floor uses and would also increase the public realm area for pedestrians. This image shows how the development would appear from the west on Lordship Lane. The quality review panel has stated they support the scale, massing and brick materiality of this development. This image shows the proposed development from the west from within the Peabody Cottages Conservation Area. The Conservation Officer considers that the development will cause harm to this heritage view. The building would appear to rise 2 stories above the homes at the eastern end of the conservation area. The development would mitigate this impact through the use of brick and roof materials similar to those used within this conservation area. Outside of the winter months, any heritage impact would be mitigated further by leaf cover on the existing trees. This image shows the proposed development from the north on Church Lane. The building would have a stepped frontage that accords with both the locally listed building to the north and the electricity substation to the south. This image shows the proposed development from a pedestrian entrance on the eastern side of Bruce Castle Park. The development is slightly visible between the trees on the far side of the park. This image shows the development street scene from the Roundway. Existing trees would be retained and new planting provided. The ground floor uses would increase lighting and natural surveillance onto this street. This image shows the development street scene from Church Lane. The fire damaged and underutilised buildings and yard spaces would be replaced by a new building featuring elements of detailing influenced by the existing local built heritage. The new building would increase natural surveillance over Church Lane and would provide a significantly greener street frontage. This image shows the new east-west route that would connect the Roundway and Church Lane, increasing access to Bruce Castle Museum and Park for local residents. The development would provide a significant uplift in urban greening compared to the existing site. It would include several planted communal amenity areas, which would be accessible for all residents. The car parking for the development would be provided on Church Lane. The development would not negatively impact local cycle infrastructure. So to summarise, this development proposal provides a mixed-use residential and commercial redevelopment on the site, which is in accordance with site allocation SA63. It provides Class E retail and F1 non-residential institution uses, which provide improved employment space and an uplift in jobs. There's a high-quality design with the quality review panel stating that there was much to admire in the proposed design, including the scale and massing and the brick materiality of the scheme, and also that careful thought has been given to the landscape design. The design has evolved further since the panel's comments, and there is support from the scheme from the council's design officer. In terms of heritage impact, the scale and height has been minimised through pre-application discussions. No objections have been received from Historic England. The Conservation Officer finds a moderate level of less than substantial harm to the significance of local heritage assets. Paragraph 202 of the MPPF states that where there is less than substantial harm, this should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. The development will provide substantial public benefits, including new housing and affordable housing, renewed employment space, a new route through the site, and optimised development on a vacant and derelict site. As such, the development is acceptable and balanced in terms of its heritage impact. In terms of housing and affordable housing, there are 76 new homes, 21% affordable housing by habitable room. This is the maximum reasonable amount following viability testing. The scale and height of the development is limited by heritage considerations, which prevents more housing or affordable housing being provided on the site. There are 63% affordable rent homes, 37% shared ownership homes, 12% three-bedroom homes, 10% wheelchair user homes, and the development has been designed to be tenure blind. In terms of residential quality, the scheme would meet London Plan internal and amenity space standards. 80% of the homes would be dual aspect. There would be communal amenity and play space accessible by all residents within the site. There's secure access calls and lift access to all blocks. Wheelchair homes are distributed within all blocks, and all buildings would be protected from fire by sprinklers. In terms of neighbouring residential amenity, there would be no significant impact on the amenity of nearby residents. In terms of carbon reduction, solar panels and air source heat pumps mean that there's 60% carbon reduction saving against 2013 building regulations. In terms of parking, there are 4 blue badge parking spaces proposed on the streets. There's no negative impact on the cycle lane, and there's high quality secure cycle parking provided within the development. In terms of public realm and landscaping, there's a new route through the site, an improved pedestrian environment in the surrounding area, new trees and soft landscaping planted, and an 86% net gain in biodiversity. Planning obligations have been secured through this development, including the 21% affordable housing, as mentioned, carbon offsetting contribution of £91,000, employment and skills contribution of £34,400, travel plans and related monitoring totalling £10,000, car club contributions, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, wayfinding proposals and other contributions as necessary. As such, officers recommend the committee resolves to grant planning permission subject to conditions and planning obligations as set out in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Right. So points of clarification, please, to the planning officer. So Councillor White first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got two things that I'd like to clarify. The first part is about the issue of affordability, and the second part is about highway safety. So first of all, this proposal offers 21% affordable housing by habitable room, which it doesn't seem to me to be in accordance with policy H4 and H5 of the London Plan, which talks about a minimum of 35% for developments over 10 or more units. Then we've got our own development plan, SP2, which says subject to viability, which I'm going to ask a little bit about in a second. We're talking about 40% in there, and the maximum reasonable amount of affordable housing provision, that's in DM13. So I suppose that's when we need to look at what we've just seen on the screen there, where we say that this development offers the maximum reasonable amount of affordable housing following viability testing, and how that squares with what's written in 6.35 of the report, where it says the site has the potential to accommodate a greater scale of development with a greater number of affordable homes. However, this would result in a greater impact on the surrounding heritage assets. So I suppose this all it all kind of depends on the interpretation of the word reasonable in the policy, and whether it's reasonable to not provide more affordable housing, which is potentially providable on the site, because we would see a greater heritage impact. By the way, also we're not talking about actual damage to heritage assets. We're talking about visual, how things look. Maybe a slightly taller building would look in the vicinity of an existing heritage asset. So I'm interested in how the process works of finding that supposed optimum balance, and how we get to that when we're balancing the need for genuinely affordable housing in the borough with the visual aspect of the visual appearance of a place for people walking around in the area and living in the area. Thank you.
Yeah, I can touch on the viability side of things and the affordable housing. So the policy target in the council's local plan is 40%, and that's borough-wide. And the mayor has a similar target, slightly lower, at 35%, below which, if the less than those targets is provided, then they need to be supported by a viability assessment, a financial viability assessment for the development, which demonstrates that what the applicant has provided is the maximum reasonable amount. So although as officers we try and maximise the amount of affordable housing on every single site in terms of the figure, it's not always possible to meet those targets, and the applicant has the opportunity to demonstrate to us through a financial viability appraisal that it is the maximum that has been provided. In this case, an appraisal was undertaken and independently reviewed, and it was shown that the scheme is in deficit with the planning obligations and the council's updated CIL figures that are currently required. So, so there's no space within the development as presented at the moment within the envelope of the scheme to provide any more affordable housing in this case.
Did you want to come? Did you want to ask
I did briefly.
question?
I also had a second question.
Yes, I was going to bring you in for that one as well.
But
okay.
I just wanted to point out
Just hold on a minute, Councillor Rice. Go on, Councillor.
I know we're told that 40% is a borough-wide figure, but it does seem to me that SP2 says subject to viability, sites capable of delivering 10 units or more will be required to meet a borough-wide affordable housing target of 40%. So that does seem to me to apply to sites, the way that policy is worded.
Okay, Councillor White, okay, you've got a second question which was on highway safety. Do you want to ask that one?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so in the original report that was circulated to us last week, the transportation officer has submitted an objection on a number of grounds, but one of which was of detrimental impact on cycling infrastructure, and it talks of serious highway safety and issues caused to cyclists. Now we've got the addendum today where the transportation officer still objects on other grounds, but on the danger posed to cyclists, it now states that there is a neutral effect on the cycle and pedestrian facility, which seems to me quite a significant change from what appeared in the original report. So I'd just like to get some clarification on why there's been a change from what seems to be a claim of significant detrimental impact to cyclists to a neutral effect. How's that change in opinion come about, please?
Chair, if I may, at this point it'd be good to bring in Maurice from the transport team just to explain the further information he's received since the publication of the report that's led him to that change in conclusion.
Good afternoon, Chair. Maurice Richards, Transport Planning Team Manager. Councillor, and Chair, it's fair to say that we're still need a detailed scheme to be designed up and a stage 1 and stage 2 road safety audit undertaken as part of the Section 278 agreement. What the applicant has done since we provided those comments, they've gone away and they've looked at the scheme and the design of the scheme in line with LTN 120 and the London Cycle Design Standard, and has proposed a few changes. We're comfortable that now it's a neutral impact in that there is a residual carry of waste similar to what exists on site. However, we'll be looking as part of the Section 278 agreement, which is attached as an obligation to this application to look at an enhancement rather than a neutral effect. But currently, as stand, I can confirm it's neutral, and we'll look as part of the 278 to see how we can enhance the existing facility.
Thank you, Maurice. So, Councillor Over.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 points to raise. I'll be as brief as possible.
8 points of clarification.
Yeah, just questions that I need to ask the officers.
All right.
So the first one's on the impact of heritage assets. At page 127 under site requirement, point 4, it states a development on the site should enhance the setting of Bruce Castle. However, under the Conservation Officer's comments at page 191, it is noted there will be an impact of the nearby heritage assets, so the wording being visually intrusive and overbearing developments, and misses the opportunity to enhance the area. So how will this development meet this site requirement of enhancing heritage assets when it will have an impact? So that's the first question. All
right, let the officer come back to you on that one.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out. It is one of the site requirements. We would, in an ideal world, like every development to meet all of those site requirements. It's not always possible. We have to weigh up all of the positive and sometimes occasionally slightly negative impacts of development as a whole. In this case, it hasn't been possible to enhance Bruce Castle, but we are confident that the impact is limited enough that it can be offset by all of the other benefits of the scheme. So you're right to point that out. We haven't quite met that target in this case, but we feel there are justifiable reasons for doing so.
Thank you. The second point being relating to the children's play area. At page 116, it is stated that the development will provide children play spaces. However, there's a park right by the site with a play area that requires improvement. Would it not be more ideal to provide contribution for an improved play area to the nearby park than have it in the development? Moreover, with additional residents from this development, there will be further impact to the park with potential increase of park users. But there is no mention in the papers of a contribution to the park. Why is there no contribution, and can there be a contribution to Bruce Castle Park?
So the development provides a significant quantum of play space on the site. We have to review the scheme in front of us, and the total provided exceeds the Mayor's child space calculator requirement. So in that case, there's no shortfall, and because there's no shortfall, we're not in a position to ask for a contribution towards the park. It's likely that children will play on the site. Yes, there may be some play on the park as well, but it's not enough in this case to necessitate a contribution.
Chair, just to add to that, the policy position is that the first instance should be that the play space is on site, so that's in line with policy and encouraged by policy. There will also be a contribution through the community infrastructure levy that could go to parks as part of that process, and I think you can consider this to be potentially making a contribution to that through that.
Thank you. Second last point regarding carbon emissions. At page 116, it is stated that the development would achieve a 60% reduction in carbon emissions. Why can't a high percentage of reduction be achieved?
It's another one where we assess the scheme in front of us. We do push the applicant through negotiations at pre-application stage to provide as many solar panels and air source heat pumps as they can. They've maximised that on this site, given the constraints of the site layout, and so in that case, this is the maximum they can realistically achieve.
Thank you. And the last point, thank you, Chair, regarding the construction plan, I understand from paragraph 6.146 at page 153, there is no detailed construction logistics plan submitted with the application and would need to be secured by condition. Can it be ensured within this plan that the impact on residents, particularly during the school run, will be minimal? Thank you.
Chair, again, I think it would be useful just to bring in Maurice Richards from the transportation team on that. Yes, the condition is page 165 and condition 14.
Chair, if I may, it's normally at this stage when at the planning the developer hasn't appointed a contractor, but as soon as they appoint a contractor, they will produce a draft which they'll send over to us, and we always where necessary, make sure that construction activities is planned outside the critical school drop-off and collection period. And considering the proximity of Risley Avenue School, we will make sure we secure something similar as part of this construction management plan.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Councillor Ovac. So I've got Councillor Corley Harrison and then Councillor Rice.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of points slightly interlinked. Just to raise a point that I've raised pretty much every single meeting. Why is the viability assessment not in the pack? Because it's actually really crucial, because Chris, you said that there's a deficit from the viability assessment. But that's not really true. There's a deficit in their viability assessment, but there's a surplus in the council's independent viability assessment of 73 grand. But that 73 grand isn't referenced in the report at all. And actually the council doesn't say anywhere that it has asked for that 73 grand to be spent on anything. So has that request been made for that to become Section 106 money, or that can be a contribution to affordable housing off-site? And also, I think probably, sorry, I'll finish that point. I think probably for a lot of new members, you know, the back and forth between the viability companies is quite interesting in the report. So I think having that within the pack's really important for making a decision on this application. I can come back on that, but my second point is slightly linked.
Okay, well,
Come back on that first, and then, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. No problems. Yes, there in the initial or in the response from the independent viability assessor, there was a small surplus. The reason for that was because the viability appraisal presented by the applicant on submission of the application was undertaken before the council's revised CIL figure came into being, which covers this site. So when the application was submitted, the CIL figure was £15 a square metre. That's gone up now to 50. And the surplus that was shown in the viability response, the independent response has been swallowed up by that additional CIL figure. So now there's a significant deficit and more money has instead gone to CIL.
Well, so I'll say, why is that not in the report? That detail, why is that not in the report? Because I think that's quite crucial. And my second point really relates to the transport aspect, which was going to relate to that surplus, which isn't clear on. But in respect to the remaining objection from transport, which relates to the blue badge, the location of the blue badge parking and the restrictions on it. And it was going to be whether that surplus can apply to resolving that issue. But obviously, if there's not that surplus, would the council's policy on allowing residents to apply for permit-specific blue badge, I don't know what it would be called, reservations, let's say, for want of a better word, would that resolve that conflict potentially so that those spaces could be reserved for the sole use of the residents on site upon application, and therefore, if that was the case, that the objection from the transport officers, you know, they would no longer object because it wouldn't be a free-for-all. If you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do understand that there is a sort of a council, the council allocates parking bays in some circumstances to disabled occupiers of buildings, so that would be able to cover this development. It doesn't cover off the transportation officers' objections because the method for doing that is different to how they would how it would happen if the parking was on site. So it doesn't quite cover off the policy, but in practice there's a similar arrangement.
Rice.
Thank you. I thought you'd forgotten me. Yeah. I'm curious to where this percentage come from in terms of 40% borough-wide. I've never heard it spoken in those terms. On Tottenham Hill, there was a time when we had 3 large tall blocks being developed, and the argument was, well, we pooled affordability between the 3, and that will get you over the 40% line. But I've never heard it, and I'd be interested to see the motion that went to this committee or any other council committee to say, well, you don't have to have 40% per dwelling, per dwelling, as it were. You can have 40% over the whole borough. I don't know where that's come from. I've never heard it before.
Chair, if I can, I'll just maybe wrap up several of those points. As Councillor White pointed out earlier, the 40% target is subject to viability on each site. So it's a borough-wide target, but there's a sort of carve-out that allows for viability testing. So in this case, the viability evidence says that this is the maximum reasonable amount. So as was said earlier by Chris, that's an assessment of what's on the site in terms of what's proposed. It's not an assessment of whether it could be larger and accommodate more. That's a slightly different policy argument in terms of optimization. So if you were to say that this wasn't providing the maximum reasonable amount because it's not big enough. That's not really the test you should be applying in your minds. That's a question of optimization, which would be weighing development potential against the sort of visual impact. So in this case, on the 40%, that's been assessed by our third-party assessor, that they're experts in that. They've given us their expert opinion. We don't have any evidence to the contrary to that, so that's accepted, and has shown to be a surplus at one point, which has been swallowed up by infrastructure. So that now shows that the maximum that this specific development can provide is being provided. In Tottenham Hale, we had a portfolio approach, so that looked at different sites delivering different levels of affordable housing. So that's how the plan-wide approach works in a smaller area. So some were delivering 100%, some were delivering much less, and the overall balance there achieved 40%. So that's how it works across the plan. So you seek to maximise what you can on each site, and that aims to meet an overall borough-wide target.
Can I just finish this point off, Councillor? Right.
Okay.
I'd be interested to know when last has this committee approved an application which contained 40% affordable housing. And what I've got the chair before the chair moved on, at 3.5, page 121, there's a talk about buff bricks and terracotta dwellings, detailing. I asked some time ago these examples could come to the committee so we can actually see what the thing will look like once it's assembled. We haven't had one yet. Why is it so difficult just to bring a few bricks and bits and pieces to the committee so we see? But this is what we're actually talking about. And by the way, what's photovoltaic panels? That's at 33.5 as well. Photovoltaic panels, what are they?
Photovoltaic panels are what are commonly referred to as solar panels.
Well, we need to have it correct, don't we? So, all right. We'll.
Yes, I think we'd left it that if there was a circumstance where we felt it was critical, we would bring that. In this case, the brick proposed has been designed to mirror the Peabody cottages, which are adjacent to the site. So that really, I suppose, should be in your minds in terms of the brick that you would expect. But there's a long way to go before the developer picks that specific brick. So it could be misleading if they bring a brick tonight that they can't actually build with, because when they come to implement their permission 6 months down the line, it's not in production anymore, or supplies aren't available. So we don't want to mislead the committee. The proposal is to reflect the surrounding character, so we'll be closely scrutinising that in consultation with the design officer to make sure, and the heritage officer to make sure that does tie in with the local area.
Councillor Brennan.
Well, going back to construction works, given the proximity to Bruce Castle Museum and all the school visits and activities that they have, so many visitors there, while the construction's going on, can we make it a prerequisite that they use acoustic hoarding to just stop the impact on the museum while they're building it?
Yeah, I can just say that there is a requirement for acoustic hoarding in the CLP conditions, so we will be requiring details with that submission. Thanks.
What?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, but I do need some further clarification on the affordability question, because I'm not quite getting what we're being told here. What we appear to be being told is that we can't, notwithstanding what it says in the report about the site potentially being able to provide more affordable housing, we can't take that into consideration, because what we've got to take into consideration is the application that's before us. And the application that's before us in itself cannot viably provide more affordable housing. Now, surely if it doesn't provide enough affordable housing according to our policies, then it's not an acceptable development. But then to say, well, it's not viable, and you can't, this doesn't, I can't square this circle really, that we then can't say, well, the site could provide more affordable housing with a different development, but this one doesn't, and this one can't viably provide more affordable housing. There's something, I can't square that circle, I'm afraid, sorry.
Yeah, I'll just take that one, Chair. I think what I'm saying is there's two separate assessments you should have in your mind. So one is, does this particular development provide the maximum reasonable amount? That's an assessment of the viability report that comes with this proposal. There's a separate assessment of whether it's optimised development and whether it's high quality development. All of that, those design considerations are separate from that. So it's not often that you see something of this scale. Developments are usually larger. Given the pressure to deliver affordable housing in London at the moment. But the point we've made is that the reason that the level of development has been suppressed here is because it's beside a Grade 1 listed building, of something of national importance. So we have to be very careful of that. So officers have found that on a site, if you took away those heritage assets, you would go higher, but in this case you can't. So members could find that weighing differently, saying, well, this can take more heritage harm to optimise development. That would, if you could satisfy yourself with that, that would be, a reason to reject the development. But on the basis that it's not the maximum reasonable amount of affordable housing based on the viability assessment, that there's no evidence for that. So those are the two assessments that you need to sort of carry out separately in your mind.
Sorry, just to come back on that.
All right, just
to come back on it, because what we're saying now is that because for me, and I don't know if maybe other members of the committee, affordability is crucial. So it's really important that we get the right understanding of where the balance is being struck here. So we need all the information before we can make a decision. So do we actually have all that information in front of us? Because we're talking about the viability assessment. That itself is crucial. Am I missing how that decision has been made, or is it in the papers? Or
well, so the policy on optimising development is set out in the London Plan, and that puts a big focus on design review. So in this case, that has been carried out by our quality review panel, and these words like this development sits comfortably in its context. So that's our basis of is this the right scale of development for the site? We've put it to our independent design review, and they've said yes, this is the right scale for this site. So that's really where we've how we've set that out. We haven't talked you through the iterations that we saw at pre-app. We've given you the positive endorsement from our independent design review. That they would have had the opportunity to say, well, you've not gone big enough here. That there's an opportunity to go bigger and optimize this, but they haven't said that. They've said this is the right scale and the right design for this site.
But the question of affordability isn't just about design, is it? It's a question of the maximum amount of affordability, that affordable housing that is viable. That's a matter of cold hard figures and cash. So in order to make that judgment, I mean, otherwise we're just taking it on trust. So how can we make that decision here tonight without that information?
I just want to bring Rob Shizzowski in, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it is an important issue to grapple with, Councillor White, on that balance. I suppose ultimately, if we were meeting the full amount of affordable housing, then it would be unlikely that we're then meeting the policy requirements in terms of heritage. So there's always going to be a balance where we're not meeting 100% of one of the policy requirements, and that is a planning judgment to come to. Some of this is covered. You've asked of where in the report. Probably the best place to point towards is page 131. Paragraph 6.35, which I know you have found, but that is probably the bit that summarises it best. It is a planning judgment, and we think that all of the information that is needed in terms of the affordable housing and viability is in the report to make that distinction, and the case officer has talked through that and what the viability report says, and it has been independently reviewed. So the independent viability assessor has looked at this and come to that conclusion, and officers have scrutinised that as well. So it is a tricky balance.
I'm really
Councillor White, no, hold
I'm really
on.
sorry, Chair, but
No, sorry, just wait a minute. Councillor Caller Harrison wanted to come in.
I think this goes back to my earlier point, but there's two separate things I think probably that Councillor White's grappling with. The viability assessment for this application is available publicly. It's just on the planning application. It's not included in the report, which was my frustration every time, which is this leads to confusion from panel members if it's not in the report, because as Matt said, we're taking it on trust on a one-liner, when actually we can read that whole report for ourselves, digest it, and make a decision on the viability of this scheme. But also, I don't think that there is enough detail here on optimisation, and to have given the indication that actually we could have obtained more affordable housing with a different scheme actually misleads us somewhat, because we need to be looking at this application. But giving that inference means there has been some behind the scenes activity going on to go, well, actually, if this was brought forward 3 stories higher, we could squeeze 30% rather than 20-odd%. But we don't have that information, again, on optimisation. So I think going back to that point, it's really important what you put in the report for us to be able to make a fair and accurate decision. And you may feel that a paragraph sums it up correctly and accurately, and it probably does, but I think for a lot of us, it doesn't give the full background. And you can also refer us to somewhere else, that's fine, an appendix, that's fine, but do so and present it. It shouldn't be on us to go through an application and read every single file on it, because I can tell you on this application, there were a lot of files to go through just to find the viability ones. You know, there's one specifically on SUDS which says we're not doing any. Great, okay, fine, that can be a paragraph, but you know, there's a lot here. And then on the optimisation thing, I don't think there's anything really. There's not enough other than that paragraph. I hope that helps somewhat slightly, Matt, but I don't think the information is truly in the report, personally.
Do you want to come back on? No. Okay. All right, Councillor White.
So I suppose just to finish off on this point, and the planning protocol does state that the committee is entitled to decide the weight to be attached to the various planning considerations which are relevant to the application, which might lead to a decision which is contrary to the recommendations of the officers. Now, how can we make that decision if that information, if all that information isn't there for us? And I think in this case, in the case of affordability, because maximising affordability is important, as is heritage impact, and we need to be able to strike that balance. But the information about how that balance has been struck isn't in the report that we're considering tonight. So I would like to move to defer this until we've had time to consider all the information that needs to be, so that we can satisfy ourselves that the correct balance has been struck.
I think just
the proposal to defer before the committee, it needs to be seconded and voted on before we proceed.
Was that a motion then?
I've moved a motion and stated my reasons for it.
So is there a seconder? No. Okay. All right.
I think just to explain one more time, I think you would have to satisfy yourself that an additional story would be acceptable here. I think that's really the exercise you can carry out in your mind, is that from your perspective, you believe that there's more development could be provided here. Again, there's a lot has gone into the background of this, and that's supported in on-plan policy. It says that we should have an appraisal of options, and that's how you determine what the optimum density is. That has happened in the background, and you're getting the sort of outputs of that, which is similar to the viability. That there's a lot that's gone on, but really we've summarised that and given you that position. So I think that's really the view in the way that you could look at the design and decide for yourself that it wasn't of high quality. If it looks too small, that's really the assessment you should be carrying out in your mind. So you don't need to see what a bigger one necessarily looks like. You just would need to satisfy yourself that this wasn't big enough.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we're now moving on to the objectors. The objectors have 3 minutes each to address the committee. Carol Herbs, is Carol here? Can you sit in the end chair there, Carol? Okay, that's fine. Just give me a nod when you're ready. You have 3 minutes, Carol, starting now.
That's it.
Start again. Okay, right. I'm here tonight to represent the committee of the Friends of Bruce Castle, but I'm also a Haringey Heritage Ambassador and stakeholder in Bruce Castle Park, and I run local heritage walks in the area. So the majority of what I'm going to be saying is about the heritage part. Whilst the Friends of Bruce Castle do not object to the redevelopment of this site, we do object to this application on the grounds of height, design quality, impacts on nearby heritage assets. The site is located within Bruce Castle Conservation Area. To the east, Bruce Castle Museum and Tower, Grade 1 listed. The West Wall, Grade 2 listed, and on the at-risk register that no one's mentioned at the moment, which is the wall in between the development and the castle. To the west, Peabody Cottage Conservation Area. To the north, All Hallows Church and Vicarage, which are both Grade 2 listed, and joined to Bruce Castle Museum by Church Lane. All Hallows is 1,000 years old, and there's been a building on or near the present Bruce Castle Museum site for over 1,000 years. Also to the northwest, Risley School is locally listed. There are actually also, in addition, 20 listed buildings on Bruce Grove alone, which is the road that comes up towards the museum, one of which is the Draper's Arms Houses and Chapel. So not surprisingly, this site is located within an archaeological priority area, historic park and Grade 2 listed site of importance for nature conservation, and presently in linear view of Alexandra Palace. Although the Conservation Officer has no objection in principle, parts of her report seem quite damning and contradicting. I note that the site requirements state that the development on this site should enhance the setting of Bruce Castle, including access to Bruce Castle Park. Development guidelines state that the height should be limited to the adjacent nursery and existing houses to the north of the site, and recognises the importance of Bruce Castle Park, considers it to be a community asset. However, it makes no mention to the impact this will have on the role of the museum, which has been a museum for 116 years within the community. The courtyard lies in between the museum and the West Wall and has recently been developed to maximise its use. This 5-storey build would totally block the light, rendering it impossible to continue to improve or use it. And this courtyard is also an asset when conducting weddings within the tower and the castle. Many Haringey children from all wards pass through the museum doors every year, and have for many generations, myself included. Sorry.
Right, guidelines also state that offers an opportunity to create a visual architectural landmark, making the entrance and settings of Bruce Castle and to act as a wayfinder to the heritage assets nearby. But Bruce Castle is the wayfinder. The tower marks the entrance to all the assets which could be blocked and overshadowed by this redevelopment. Is that my 3 minutes?
It is actually 3 minutes up. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. So have Councillor Sue Jameson, 3 minutes. Okay, Councillor, whoever.
I won't do 3 minutes.
It's starting now.
Okay. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank all the councillors that have spoken, because they've raised the concerns that I have got. So I'm a councillor for Bruce Castle, and my inbox is full of people who are struggling because they're living in 2-bedroom places. And as far as I can see on this development, although there are 9 3-bedroom places, none of those 3-bedroom places are offered as affordable. Is that correct? So there wouldn't be a 3-bedroom place in this whole build. Is that right? So they can still, you can still get one of the 3-bedroom places. But also it's largely what Matt was saying, in that we're taking, it sort of looks like we're taking the amount of affordable we're going to get on trust. And I would have seconded his motion if I'd have gotten the chance, so that we had that particular point clarified. So when I first looked at it, at this development, I was surprised because it looked much better than I thought it was going to. But always the devil is in the detail, and you know, we want to make sure that we've got guaranteed the maximum amount of affordable housing. So that's essentially what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Ali. And you've got 3 minutes starting. Are you ready?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the chance to say a few words. I came to this committee about another scheme in my ward, which was very contentious, but I was very confident at the time that the benefits outweighed some of those harms. I think in this case, I'm very sad to say that I'm sort of forced to object on a number of grounds. But I don't come here easily. I mean, today is obviously my birthday, and it's not a material consideration to planning, but it shows the strength of feeling that myself, my ward colleagues and residents who've sort of emailed me and spoken to me ad nauseum over the weekend about their concerns. And my role as an elected representative is to actually champion the ward and its interests. And actually, and the ward is heritage. It's the gateway to heritage. It's got so many listed assets in the ward. It is the real attraction to that part of Tottenham. We see there are far more visitors that attend Bruce Castle Museum than William Morris Museum. And I think that's been the lacking aspect of the report, the lack of the impact on the museum, its ability to raise funds. A scheme of this height will generally have a financial consequence on the council's finances. What kind of bid opportunities would we not be able to submit because of the impact of development of that height and that nature? And it would open up any brownfield site within the entire conservation area for higher and dense buildings. And that is a genuine concern about preserving this heritage that we've seen more or less unchanged since the war. And like I said, I mean, this site's been here for over 1,000 years. It's the only thing that connects Henry VIII, Hollywood actors, and medieval Arabists. And I think it's quite a shame that we're not able to actually recognise the value of our heritage assets. So there's a few things. The wall is listed, and that's not been mentioned at all. It's a Grade 2 listed wall, and it's actually registered as being at risk. And I'm quite concerned that the the references to piling aren't actually substantiated or evidenced or even explored about the impact it will have on this wall. Again, the council will be financially liable if there's any damage to this grade 2 listed wall. In terms of the issues of affordability, as you mentioned, Harringay is fourth most borough in London, and yet we're seeing no social housing. I think that's really important. Affordable rents, yes, London living wage, the mayor's rent, all the rest of it, but none of it's social. And I think there's other points to mention in regards to the survey. CS1's been upgraded, the cycle superhighway. It's already a very congested rat run. I'm quite surprised there's been no traffic surveys because it's well known that AM and PM peaks, it's absolutely jammed, especially on match days due to people parking on privately owned sites. In reference to the east-west pedestrian route, we have one. It's called All Hallows Road. That is the east-west pedestrian route. This proposal will actually create ASB issues and will lure away a lot of the antisocial behaviour, drug use, drug dealing that we see in the high road into a far more residential area. The lack of an objection from Historical England should not mean that they don't have a concern of it. It means that they have actually deferred this decision to you as a committee. So just to conclude, this is the most consequential planning decision in the history of this ward. It will have a huge consequence, not only historically, but also financially. And it doesn't actually address, and just to end, Councillor Blake, it doesn't actually address the housing crisis. The nearby school's seen a decline in pupil numbers.
Councillor Ali,
so I would ask you to really think very carefully about those impacts. Thank you, Councillor
Blake. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Right, so members can ask questions of the objectors. Are there any questions? Councillor Buxton.
Yeah. So two questions, obviously. The three objectors have kind of highlighted the issue that Councillor White has raised, being that Councillor Jameson talking about not enough social housing, whereas Councillor Ali and Carol talking about the heritage impact. So again, it's squaring the circle, as Councillor White said, between these two aspects, which is kind of my first question, because the site needs that. So how would that be put forward? And my second question is more, Carol, you did discuss the history of the site. I'm still not entirely clear what the damage to heritage is, and Historic England have deferred the decision to us. Obviously, there's the development isn't on the site; it is overshadowing the site or looking over the site. So, a bit more clarity on what the heritage impact is in your mind. In my 2 points. Yeah, really, any of you? I would, the balance between your 2 points and Councillor Jameson's point would be interesting to hear your responses to.
Yeah, come back to the microphone. Yeah, Ms. Hebbs.
The heritage it might not be physically damaging in say 75%. It's more of the fact that it's blocks out the view from the building, which it's meant to accentuate and help, and all these other things that are in the Conservation Officer's report. And as Councillor Ali was saying, the Heritage England, the fact that they didn't comment was not because they didn't have anything to comment on, that they had deferred the decision to the Conservation Officer because they thought it was a local decision. The fact of the physical part, as also Councillor Ali was saying, that the fact that the lane is very, very narrow, so the at-risk wall is literally just a few feet away from the development, so that, as he rightly said, if there is any damage caused to that wall, then it would be considerably amount of money to, well, you can't replace it, but do something to it. Okay. Yeah.
Councillor Colley-Harrison. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Sorry.
Sorry, there was the second point, which I think Councillor Ali is.
Sorry about that. I will bring you in, Councillor Colley-Harrison. Okay.
I'm very sorry, Chair, to speak again. I feel very strongly about my birthday.
Well, that's the second time you've reminded us.
I know, I'm not expecting any cake
so-
from you, Councillor Blake. Just we can sing happy birthday later, I'm sure. I just think on the point of the balance, I mean, one thing to state clearly is that there was an application made in 2005. And I think what's actually quite a shame is that it feels slightly hurried, this application. There could have been a lot more time and thinking given to acquiring more of the site, to actually negotiating with other landowners. And I think some of the assumptions about the decline in petrol use is slightly bizarre, because we've seen an upgrade in the petrol stations for EV charging points, so they're not going away. So I think what's happened is I think the developer's trying to put a square in a round peg by having a very densely developed site and sacrificing some of those concerns that I've raised. Now, in terms of the balance, I think it's very clear. I'm not personally against development. I think I welcome development on that site. But what I would welcome is that the development shouldn't be superior to the heritage sites that are established and that are very significant locally and nationally. There is a genuine impact in terms of the use of the museum. I mean, as we mentioned, the courtyard at the moment, and this actually was missing from the paperwork, which is very quite upsetting. That is the key site that should be taken into account. When you're inside the museum in the courtyard, when young people, children are visited, again, it's more visited than William Morris, which people don't know that. It's a very popular site of national, local, and regional historical significance and importance. And at the moment, you can see the tip of the corrugated iron. And it's all blue sky. And I think a lot of people actually come for that for the purpose of marrying, for the purposes of having events there, for educational purposes. All those things will diminish over time, and then that reduces the financial ability for the museum to raise funds. Therefore, that has an added impact on the financial sort of situation the museum will find itself, having to rely more on the council. And I think we don't want to get to that stage. We want to see the museum thriving, being able to bid for more funding, be able to actually offer
Councillor
more.
Ali, I think you've answered the question.
Oh, thank you. I didn't think it was that thorough.
Right, I think you have answered the question.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I do want to, can I bring in Mr.
Thank you, Chair. I think at this point it'd be good to hear from the Council's conservation expert on how the impact has been considered, what impacts have been considered, and just her findings. If I could bring in Elisabetta. John, if you could help her with a microphone there.
Yes, sure. About impacts, I think it is important to consider that when we look at the impact of potential development, we're not simply looking at direct material impact on the surrounding heritage assets. We also need to look at the visual experience, anything that contributes to the way we enjoy these assets. So that's the reason why this new development has been assessed not only in its potential interfacing with surrounding assets, which is very limited in material terms. And also we have to consider that, yes, the boundary walls of Bruce Castle are quite fragile assets. So the south boundary wall, the west boundary walls are on the Heritage at Risk register, but it is very much due to a deteriorating fabric, the brickwork. We have no indication that there are problems with the foundations, any subsidence issue, nor we have any indication that new development would be impacting in a structural manner on the surrounding heritage asset. So everything needs to be assessed on its very specific basis. And we also need to consider that all this development clearly has started from a very ambitious attempt to maximize quantum and possibly to achieve what would be the ideal target also for housing. But from the heritage perspective, we have really had to restrain, to clarify which were the constraints and the opportunities, because the site definitely offers opportunities, offers an opportunity to be tidied up, offers an opportunity to provide a better public realm, offers also an opportunity to provide a better fruition of that space, offers an opportunity to provide also housing, probably not to the scale and to the extent that would be desirable, but definitely there is an opportunity there. And it is an opportunity which has been quite difficult and laborious to come to a sort of finalized scheme.
There's been quite a lot of balancing, mediating between the aspiration, the design aspiration, and all the heritage impact that is constantly assessed throughout the design process. So there's been a long design exploration that has led to the scheme that you're seeing now. It is a scheme that in the end, obviously has an impact. Whatever we do within and around the historic environment brings up some change. And so there is an impact. And this impact can be neutral, but can be also to some extent, even if marginally harmful. And it is heritage officers' duty to identify this impact in all its shades. But this doesn't mean that whatever we do or new development is intrinsically wrong or is intrinsically not delivering whatever is needed by the local community. So, and we can see also in the design of this development that a lot of effort has been brought to the design to try and mediate between the scale of the historic environment and the new development. There are varying heights, varying masses. The architectural language tries to be quite subtle, quite responsive, but at the same time respectful of the extremely characteristic and distinctive buildings that surround it. Also in terms of views, all the assessment has very carefully assessed the impact that visually this new development will bring to the surrounding assets. And clearly, whatever we build there, there will be some sort of partial or total obscuring or overshadowing of other assets. But obviously, the environment is experienced in a very dynamic way. And what we see there in terms of height, mass, bulk, and also architectural language is very much a compromise, a very realistic compromise. And I think this is important to consider.
Thank you. So I think Councillor Corley, right, okay, all right. So no more questions, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rice, for your that supportive comment. So, right, moving on. So we have the applicant and the supporters to address the committee. You get 9 minutes. Would you like? Yeah, okay. And if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Chris Horn from Hillview, the applicant. I've got two colleagues with me, and I'll ask Holly perhaps to use part of the time to pick up on some of the detailed issues. I had a statement, as you might expect, of what I was going to say, but actually, in a way, you've got to the heart of the matter already in the discussion that you've had. We began assembling this site at the beginning of 2019. We were very clear at the outset, although it was an allocated site for housing and it was a site that was intended to contribute to your 5-year housing supply, it sits amongst some of the most amazing assets of the borough. The heritage is very much to the fore. So we knew from the outset that we would have to try and get to a balanced position between the heritage considerations and the delivery of housing. And we were also very clear that we don't come lightly to this committee with a scheme that doesn't meet your affordable housing aspirations, because we know how important that is. So the discussion with the officer from the outset was, could we assemble as much of the site as possible, bring forward a scheme that delivered as much benefit as possible, but did it in a way that was as sympathetic as we could be to the heritage surroundings. And that's what we've attempted to do over the last 3.5 years. We brought in an architectural team. We agreed the appointment with the council because we wanted to bring in somebody that had the talent and the ability and the sensitivity to deliver what you would want on this site. Now, all the way through, it's fair to say that we have pushed. We began with a larger scheme than the one you have before us tonight. And we've moved through, as our design and access statement will show, we've moved through a gradual reduction in scale of this scheme. It's been tested in views from every spot, I think, imaginable around here. We've had a very eminent heritage specialist working with us, who's been reporting back to English Heritage and to your own design and conservation teams. I have to say I don't recognise some of the comments that were made about historic England. Historic England take a very, very involved view on a Grade 1 asset, as Bruce Castle is. And we were, of course, very relieved when we finally got to a scheme that was small enough to satisfy historic England, that we weren't having significantly adverse effect on the setting of that heritage asset. So we've got to a position where we feel that we couldn't put more on this site and have any expectation that we would secure any support from the heritage bodies involved. But we think that we are making the maximum contribution we can to those ambitions that the council has for this site. We're turning a derelict site into a fully occupied and useful site. I think it's fair to say that at no point have your office has taken the view that because it is a derelict and ugly site, the bar is set low. The bar has been set very high all the way through. That's why we've had 2 very full presentations to the Quality Review Panel. We're very grateful to the Quality Review Panel for the contribution they've made to assisting the design of this scheme. And I think we've also, at the same time, of course, had to meet all those other standards, the space standards of the buildings, its environmental performance. Somebody asked the question about why we were at 60%. The target's 35% in terms of our carbon reduction. We're hitting a very, very high number on this. So we're trying to be exemplary in that. There's been some comments about Church Lane. We're widening Church Lane. We're contributing land that we've acquired. 5 sites we had to buy to bring this together, and we've contributed part of that land to the widening of Church Lane so that we can improve the appearance of the road, we can improve movement, including the contraflow cycle lane. In terms of the Castle Grounds wall, we know that's listed. I would just say, just be careful with the word piling doesn't mean driven piles. We won't be driving piles here. Piles normally now are augured piles. That means they're screwed into the ground. They have very little effect and they make very little noise. So we have no expectation, but nonetheless, we are required by condition, and we would in any event carry out a full survey before we begin any works on the ground. We think that overall, this is a site and a scheme that will make a real contribution to the area. It's a 21st century contribution to an area that has heritage from every previous century. So we're really conscious of wanting to do that well. It's the last site that will be developed out in this area. And I think to have got the support of your officers, and also I think in the past, the quiet support, certainly from some members of the local amenity groups, we think is quite an achievement. There was a previous scheme which was referenced for, I think it was 2006. It was a pretty grim scheme. It didn't have the area of land that we've managed to assemble here, and it was poorly conceived. Whether in the end you like the scheme or not is the choice you'll have to make, but we worked really hard and with a really good team to try and produce the best that we possibly can here. It's a site that we'd like to see built out, and we think once in place and once in play with its roots through, its garden spaces, its greenery, that it will make a positive and lasting contribution to the borough. So I'd hope that you don't get a sense, because you've just seen one report tonight, that there isn't a depth of history of consideration and design development, because it's been taken hugely seriously. As I say, it goes back 3.5 years. Holly, is there anything you want to add on the heritage process that we've gone through?
I don't think so, other than, you want me to come? Yeah, okay.
I think really what I wanted to say was that we've tried very hard to find what we call optimization on this site, and that isn't maximization, that is optimization. That is the amount of housing that a site can take without having too much impact. Because to maximize, we would just go 20 stories high, and we would then be able to deliver the policy amount of affordable housing. But what we've tried to do is find a scheme that really fits into its context. From the absolute outset, the first person that we instructed was our heritage advisors, because we knew how important this area was. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to, if you like, set aside the viability for a moment and find the right scheme for this site and this context. So what we've done is we've taken a design-led approach to finding exactly the right scheme that pushes the boundaries, and we've been given a hard time by your design officers because we wanted to go a bit higher, we wanted to go a bit bigger. Then what we had to do is we worked with your heritage officers and your design officers to choose and select the right viewpoints, and there were lots. There were, I think, 25 viewpoints that we first of all did a computer generation, then we went out and took verified photography, and then we put our scheme in and we kept testing it, refining it. We went to several design team meetings with your officers Then we went to the QRP, and every time their comments were taken on board, we tweaked it a little bit more. We went back to our views. We re-put it back into our views. We had another look. Were we at the right level? Did it need to be a little bit smaller? Could we go a bit larger? Because, you know, on behalf of the developer, that's what we are trying to do as well. And then we came out with a scheme that we were really happy with, and that the design review panel was supporting, that your design officer was supporting, and that's no easy task. He gave us a hard time. And then we assessed it to find out how much we could deliver in terms of affordable housing, taking into account today's build costs, taking into account the SIL levels, the amount of Section 106 money, and that all was verified and independently assessed. And I can understand your frustration that you haven't seen those reports, but you know, we went backwards and forwards. It's quite a technical report, and we have to rely on the independent assessors who we've paid for on your behalf to really look at the figures and to test what we've put forward to make sure we're delivering the maximum amount of affordable housing from this scheme that we consider has been fully optimised for the site and the surrounding context.
So I think you've still got a bit more time if there's anything you want to add quickly. Hang on, have you had the night? Is there still a bit? 30 seconds.
Well, there's only one other point. Sorry. I just wanted to make one other point. You mentioned the children's play area in the garden opposite, and we're conscious of that. We actually raised that during the course of the application. It seemed to us an obvious option to do that. I think in the event, there's a SIL payment in here of something over £300,000. And certainly if you were minded to encourage diversion of some of that money towards the garden, we would be hugely supportive of that.
Thank you. Okay. So if you stay there, if you could switch off the microphone, and then so I've got Councillor White, Councillor Over, and Councillor Corley-Harrison. So Councillor White first.
Thank you, Chair. We've just heard that you started with a larger proposal. So I'd just like to get some idea about that larger proposal that you started with. What was the potential, or do we know what the potential was for the amount of affordable housing that could have provided? And I'd also like to know what the heritage impact of that larger proposal would be compared to the current one, and maybe officers would like to come in on that as well if they've got anything to add to that. Thanks.
We'll just say at the outset, we would always begin by seeking to meet your affordable housing expectations and your policy requirement. I think when we began, at about 11 stories in the first draft of the scheme that we came in to discuss, and I think it was very quickly made apparent to us that that was not going to pass muster. And a scheme that became so prominent in so many views and so many sensitive views was simply not going to be consentable. So we worked back from that position. We've tried to spread the mass around the site whilst keeping the route through, whilst addressing each of the edges, whilst incorporating commercial uses onto the site. So we've played around with this over a long period of time, but to get anywhere near the kind of scheme that you would expect to have, all of the things being equal, this is a PTEL 5 site, and you would expect it to be carrying a large building. And anywhere else, we would be expecting to put a much denser and taller scheme here. So this is entirely a consequence of those heritage considerations. So the only answer I can give to you is that based on all the advice we've had from our own team and on the council side and on the Historic England side, is that anything larger than the scheme that we've put forward to you tonight would meet with such severe objections that you wouldn't be in a position to consent it. But I think obviously it's for your officers to say more about that if they wish to do so.
Councillor Over.
Hi, you mentioned earlier about contributing to the housing supply, and Councillor Ali mentioned that there was no social housing. And my question is whether social housing was considered, considering that hoping to contribute to the housing supply. I would have thought that social housing would have been a priority. So just wanted to get your views.
I mean, that's a product of a discussion with the planning team about the nature of the offer we've made. It is social housing in the sense that it's a mixture of affordable housing and shared ownership housing, and therefore is available to the people who are nominated through the council, who are in housing need and seeking housing within those tenures. I think the balance of tenure types that we've offered, I think, maximises the number of units that are therefore available out of the scheme, and that's got us to the 13 units. But I think the issue on the council side is how do you choose to allocate the value that's derived from the scheme? And in this case, the agreement we've reached it's a mixture of affordable rent and shared ownership units.
Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks. Just on that point, I think it's nice to see a scheme come forward with alternative affordable provision versus just social homes, because we've not had that in a while. But I'm wondering whether there has been discussion about first option for purchase from the council at all, and comment on that, and whether that would be the affordable homes for them to decide what to do with, or whether that would be any provision on site, but presumably at market rate. Then on some other points that we haven't really covered, if I may. So, actually, Councillor Ali touched on it, but the safety of the east-west pedestrian route through the site, I think we discussed when you came previously to give us the pre-app presentation before. So I'd just like some reassurance on that, discussions with the police and designing out crime. I know they haven't raised objections, but what you're doing specifically to make sure that if there does start to be problems, what's the fallback? You know, what's the safety net that you have there? Secondly, the space in front of the building on the roundway itself, it's set back quite a reasonable distance. There's some greening. The greening with trees, which are the existing trees, I think, only covers part of that, which would give some pollution and acoustic protection to the properties, but the other half doesn't have any of that. Has there been consideration to tree planting in that location to provide that, or have you had an assessment done on the impact on those units? And then I was reading your SUDS report that was with the application, which basically says you're not doing any SUDS. So I'm just wondering why that particular parcel of land, so to speak, that green area between the roundway and the building line, why that can't be developed as SUDS greenery, because my reading of the report was in part to do with London Clay, and we're doing it all over now. Haringey is pushing SUDS. So again, maybe officers could come back on why that hasn't been pushed as part of this scheme, but it would be nice for your commitment on that to be that space to be considered on that. Then also, actually, this is probably one for officers, but if I raise it now and then officers can come back on it. It's in relation to it being a car-free development. I appreciate that there isn't permit to provide an exclusion on, but presumably there could be a condition that prevents, if a permit zone comes into play, that anyone on site is not eligible at any point in the future to apply for a permit. I'm not aware of that as an existing condition, so and I'm sure that you probably wouldn't mind too much with that, but if we could get that wrapped in somehow, because that seems to also sort of neatly tie that particular issue off. And then also I'd like you to come back on the blue badge and the comments that Transport have made about the fact that they're on street and could be used by anyone, and how you envisage that working. Yeah.
And then we have a transport specialist to deal with that. So first of all, in relation to the council's position on acquiring affordable housing, we've already said absolutely, we're very happy to have that discussion with the council, and if we could reach an agreement with the council, that would make life easier for everybody. So I think there's a mutual benefit in doing that. So absolutely, in a way, that goes without saying. In terms of the east-west route, we had a discussion, as you say, here when we came during the briefing. The agreement at the moment is that would be closed at night, so open in the day. So we were quite conscious of that. We want the public benefit of permeability and cross movement through what has previously been quite a large urban block with no room for movement across it. But it can be gated off at night. look, in the fullness of time, if it feels it's safe to be open for longer hours, that always becomes a possibility. At the moment, we obviously don't want it to attract any antisocial behaviour. So we guard against that. I think in relation to you had the issue about suds and planting, which I think, Holly, you might want to deal with that. And in relation to the blue badge issue, certainly we have volunteered that if you want to include a condition that would permanently exclude residents from any future CPZ in the area, we're happy with that. This is conceived as a car-free scheme. It's designed as a car-free scheme. It will be marketed as a car-free scheme. We don't want anybody who comes to live here to bring a car to the area unless they have a blue badge requirement. So we're very happy to commit to permanent exclusion from any future CPZ.
Chair, well, I've got him in the chair. I did miss one question, and I think he probably is better suited to answer, which is related to the flank walls that are on the sites which you haven't managed to acquire, and there is intention, hopefully, at some point to bring those sites forward. Are there windows on those particular walls? None at all. They're blank walls.
No. So just for clarity, we've assembled as much as we possibly can. The Shell garage is not for sale, and on Lordship Lane, the Spurs Autos building is in a complicated private ownership, and it's not coming forward at the present time. So what we have tried to do is to achieve what I think originally you were hoping to achieve through an SPD process, which is to guide future development off the back of this detailed development. So we have made provision in the treatment of our flank walls, and in fact in the treatment of setting out of all of our buildings for those two sites, as and when the petrol use finishes and as and when the front use finishes, for them to be built out as natural continuations of this and complete the block.
Hi. I think in relation to Roundway, you're talking about the depth of the pavements, and actually those pavements are really deep. They are over 10 metres wide, which gave us some problems with drag bin distances because they were already too far. But those pavements are not in our ownership. They are, I believe, in TfL's ownership. So what we've done is where the trees are, we took an approach to making sure that we were going to protect the trees in the root zones so that they wouldn't be damaged. But then our scheme provides for a much bigger planted area underneath those trees, and we're hoping to agree that through the Section 278 process that we will put that in, which will automatically provide more suds because of the fact that it won't be all hard standing. At the moment around those trees it's a bit scrappy around the bottom of them, and what we want to do and what our landscaping plans for those areas are is a much broader planted area which will have much more suds and absorbance, but we've got to agree that through the 278 works. Oh, and then you asked me about the environment on the Roundway, and it is a harsher environment, and that's why when you look at the difference in the building, we've got inset balconies along the Roundway to try and protect those residents, so their balconies are not on the outside, they're set in, which is a different design approach to what we've achieved on Church Lane, where you can have an outy balcony, if you like.
Can I just ask one on the ownership then? It's within the red line, the TfL areas within the site red line, so we can put stipulations on it. Is that right?
It's been shown to be part of the site, so that just indicates an intention to do works to that. It doesn't show that there's necessarily the ability to do that. That would have to be secured through an agreement with TfL.
We have shown them our plans, and they have agreed in principle. Sorry, is that okay? They have agreed in principle that that would be a good thing, but obviously the detailing of it we need to do through the 278, and then we pay for it, but it is within our red line.
So just switch off your microphone. I just want to get an update from Christopher Smith on this.
Yes, just to confirm on the suds as well, there is a blue, green and brown roofs on the buildings, which would help to retain water and slow down the transfer of water, which is considered to be a sustainable drainage measure. And there's also, I believe there's some attenuation tanks as well. So there are some SUDS measures within the scheme.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Oh, go on then, Councillor.
It's on the blue badge parking again. Are the 4 spaces, are they within your site boundary or are they highways?
They're on the highway, and that's what we've been talking to your transport officers about. So there was, their preferred option was to have the parking on site, but that would have been in the garden area on Church Lane. And we fought very hard to keep that green area and the tree planting because we felt that it was really important for the setting of the site and the setting of Church Lane next to Bruce Castle. So that's where we had a bit of disagreement. And that's probably where the objection came from, but we wanted to put them on street. And then we've also added in some mobility scooter parking, which is chargeable and lockable and covered and everything else to supplement that. And that is on the site.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll now move to the recommendation, and I'd like to ask Robbie McNulty to confirm the recommendation with a summary of any changes, please.
Do you want to take those questions first, or?
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Well,
I just wanted to propose some informatives and conditions before Robbie summed up, if that's all right, based on those answers.
Just repeat.
I would like to propose some informatives and conditions based on those answers.
Yeah, happy to consider suggestions.
So I think on the being a car-free development, if we can by condition that, if you've not got that already, that future prevention if there is any CPZ coming forward. And then I think probably have to be an informative rather than condition, but a notice given to people that move in to the accessible homes that if they are to use the blue badge bays, the council offers the permitting system to make it an exclusive use. Probably an informative, I guess. And then also an informative for TfL if that green space is being redesigned in any way that the council would like to see it being designed with SUDS. If that's okay.
Councillor White.
Chair, I wanted to propose a motion before you move to the vote, but I'm happy for Robbie to sum up first before I do that.
I was just on the stipulations that you've put in. Councillor Rice's earlier point about brickwork, is that part of stipulations that we've put in, or can it be?
Yes, we've got a condition shown in Appendix 1, which includes a requirement for material samples to be submitted prior to the commencement of works.
Can you just put your microphone on so that we can hear?
Well, I just wanted to check that the highways officer was commenting earlier that there was an agreement that had been recently made that the road width of Church Lane wouldn't be reduced at all. There would be some slight realignment, that is by condition as well, that it wouldn't be reduced in width.
Yeah, that will be subject to the 278 agreement. So yeah, and that includes a road safety audit, which Maurice mentioned earlier. Yeah.
So if you can just sum up then, please.
So yes, just to sum up, recommendation is as set out in the report and the addendum, with changes to 106 in the addendum, and then the additional head of term that residents would be restricted from obtaining CPZ permits for any future CPZ. I think, having heard the representations just about the impact on the listed wall, I think with the agreement of the chair, it'd be wise just to include a condition on foundation design to ensure that what's been committed to in terms of piling is secured, and then 2 additional informatives about occupants of accessible homes being advised about the exclusive use of the blue badge parking bays, and that any works on the TfL land should seek to deliver SUDS. So, as I say, recommendation to grant in line with those changes.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. So I would like to propose a motion to reject this application. I believe that I'm required to state the planning grounds on which I'm proposing this motion. So I'm proposing that we reject this on the grounds that this application does not satisfy policies SP2 and DM13 of the local plan, which require more affordable housing than this development is proposing. And also policy H5 of the London plan, which asks for a minimum of 35% of affordable housing. I note that officers recommend that that the optimum balance between heritage impact and affordable housing has been struck. I'm not satisfied that that's the case, especially given that we've heard that this does have a heritage impact. So we're getting less than the required affordable housing and a heritage impact as well. So that's two negatives to strike this optimum balance. Secondly, I note that the transportation officer says that there is a negative, not a negative, sorry, a neutral impact on highway safety. However, policies DM31 and SP7 of our development plan both ask for for developments to improve the cycling environment, and also the London plan LPT1 and LPT2 ask for the same, and this is particularly important given that this is cycle superhighway 1. So we need now. What I would also add to this, and I'm winding up now, in both of these cases, so in the second case, the transportation case, we're advised in the report that despite as it stated in the original report, the negative impact on highway safety, the verdant and visual appearance outweigh this. Now, in both the cases of the heritage impact versus the affordable housing and the visual appearance versus the highway safety, we're being told that aesthetic criteria are outweighing physical safety and material well-being of our residents. I am not satisfied that the balance has been struck correctly in either of those cases, and on those grounds I'm moving to reject. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that, please? Okay.
Chair, if I may just offer some advice just on those grounds for refusal. My strong advice would be that in relation to the level of affordable housing, there's no evidence to say that on viability terms this could deliver more. So you would be at very high risk of being unable to defend that at appeal. The second part of that, in terms of the optimum balance, as I said earlier, that's a matter of judgment and not something that has been presented in evidence tonight. That to show that it is completely out of the question. Whereas in viability terms, you have the applicant's expert, our own expert, saying that this is the maximum viable in those terms. So my strong advice not to take forward that reason for refusal. And I think members should just bear in mind that there are some benefits in terms of the cycling, in terms of the closing of those crossovers and access with vehicles coming out onto the cycle superhighway. So just bear that in mind, that the neutral impact is a balance of positives and negatives, and there are some positives. So it could be argued that that policy is satisfied. And I'd just like a bit more clarification on your point about the aesthetic impacts and how that's being weighed against safety, because I think I'd just like to be able to advise members whether that there's merit in that, and I didn't fully understand that.
Would you like to
Chair,
withdraw?
can we hear from the legal officer?
I've been asked for
In
clarification.
respect to the matters which Councillor White put forward to the committee.
Mr. McNuggles, he's advised. Do you wish to withdraw some of your points then on the officer's advice?
First of all, I've been asked for clarification on one of the points in my motion. So perhaps I should provide that clarification first of all. So I'm referring to paragraph 6.147, which states in the original report, the Council's Transportation Officer has assessed this application, has raised an objection regarding the reduction in highway safety. It is considered that there are significant benefits, and it talks about the visual appearance of the development, in the introduction of a verdant feature into the currently harsh street frontage, and the creation of a more domestic character within this sensitive heritage environment that would outweigh the negative impacts in this case. So what I'm saying is that this paragraph appears to be weighing aesthetic criteria to weigh more strongly than the safety of road users, effectively. That was the point I was making in that case.
If I may, Chair, thank you for clarifying that. I think I would just a note of caution there. Firstly, that the position has changed in the addendum and finds that there's no safety issues, and there's two separate impacts on the two sides of the development here, really. So the verdant impact is on the Roundway side, as I understand. Whereas the impact on Cycle Superhighway is on the eastern side. So there's not a trade-off between those two. One isn't being sacrificed for the other. The officer is just noting some benefits and some negatives in that. But your reason for refusal would have to be substantiated based on what the final position of the transport officer is, and that's that there's no longer an objection and no longer a safety issue. So the point about not enhancing would have to be that you've weighed up the benefits and the negatives and find that a neutral impact isn't sufficient to satisfy that policy, which asks for enhancements as you set out.
So effectively, my motion on the transport side is that the policy, both the London Plan policy and the development plan policy, asks for improvements, and this development does not provide that.
I think there's in a assessment of the merits of that, I think there's merit in that. I think you would just have to satisfy yourself that there's a planning harm from that. Generally, where there's no improvement and one has been sought by policy, we would want to see a sort of missed opportunity, that there's something that could be done that hasn't been done, because not every site will have the ability to enhance. So just if you wanted to strengthen your reason for refusal, that would be my advice.
I did ask the committee here from the legal officer whether this matter went forward on appeal, whether it succeed or not.
Okay. So do you wish to go ahead with the motion then? Can you just wait a minute, Councillor Rice? I'm asking
I do wish to go ahead with my motion. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Do I need to hear from the legal officer? Oh.
We've been given two main reasons for refusal. That's been seconded. That's a motion on the table which we are going to have to vote on, I'm afraid, Madam Chairman.
Okay. All right. Right. Okay. Go on, Councillor.
Before we vote on that final point of the motion, can I just ask whether the new east-west route would be open to cycles, and whether that would be a new cycle provision through the site? Presumably connecting the Roundway and CS1.
Okay, right. So we have a motion on the table. So all those in favour of the motion to defer, please show. Oh, sorry. I'm getting confused. All of those in favour to refuse the motion, please show. Is that right? Right. All those in favour to agree with the motion to refuse the application, please show. Okay. Do I need to ask?
Yes, you do.
Right. So all of those. So what's the wording? All of those against, please. Any abstentions? Councillor Brooks? Yeah, okay, one abstention. Okay, so we'll now move to the recommendation, and the recommendation is to grant. So all those in favour, please show.
Chair, it's the grant subject to the amendments that's been put forward.
Yeah.
You have mentioned those.
Right. To grant subject in favour of the amendments.
See hands, please. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 6.
All those against? And any abstentions? Okay, so that's okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you as well. I'm freezing. Is anybody else freezing? Can we close the windows, please? Agree an adjournment for a minute. Everybody's gone. Yes, adjournment. Thank you.
Let me just check. Let me just check these guys.
Where's Councillor White? Can we start? Can we start? Right, thank you. Okay, so we're now on to item 12, which is the pre-app Osborne Grove Nursing Home, and that's 0017. The proposal, which is in the pack, so I won't read that out, and I will hand over to the planning officer, Tanya Skelly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Tanya Skelly, Deputy Team Leader in the Planning Department, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this pre-app at Osborne Grove Nursing Home. This pre-application proposal is by Haringey's Adult and Social Care for the demolition of the existing building and redevelopment of the site to provide 17 nursing home beds, 10 nursing studios for homelessness end of life, and 18 sheltered housing flats. The development will include a day center for use of the residents and the wider community as part of a facility to promote aging wellness. The proposal includes hard and soft landscaping works. The site is a parcel of land containing buildings, hard-standing, hard and soft landscaping, and car parking. It is used as a care home and health clinic. It lies between Upper Tollington Road, Perth Road, and Victoria Terrace. A residential terrace and a row of garages abut the northern part of the site. To the east are back gardens of residential buildings. To the southwest are garages and building in light industrial use. The Parkland Walk and Finsbury Park lie farther to the northeast. The site does not line a conservation area, but is surrounded by the Stroud Green Conservation Area on 3 sides. The Stroud Green Road to the west of the site is a designated local shopping centre in the local plan. None of the buildings within or adjoining are statutorily or locally listed. The site would be redeveloped with the construction of a new 3 to 4 stories care home to provide a nursing home and studio units with assisted care. The proposal is designed to accommodate 7 different, highly sensitive user groups with supporting facilities, landscaping, an ancillary cafe and daycare space. The scheme would include a basement level to accommodate cycle parking with new landscaping and tree planting around the site. All units would meet the relevant space standards. Officers are generally supportive of the principle of the development, as well as the scale, bulk, and massing of the development and its overall layout. However, the scheme is still being refined, and the design of the development is currently subject to ongoing revisions and considered improvements with officers. The scheme was presented to Quality Review Panel in January and May this year, who are broadly supportive. Members' feedback is being sought at this stage to inform the submission of a detailed planning application in the near future. I will now hand over to developers' representatives who will present the proposals and who will be able to answer to any questions. Thank you.
We're just trying to share the presentation. I'm David Lee. I'm the Major Projects Project Manager for this scheme. Trevor?
I'm Trevor Halls. I'm the Director of Architecture at Ingleton Wood, a multidisciplinary design company.
And I'm Emily Snelling. I am the Supported Accommodation Development Lead for Haringey. So, get a full page. There you go.
Okay, so Tanya has given you a brief explanation of this scheme. We've been working together with Haringey and the Planning Department for probably over 9 or 10 months now to get this scheme to the stage that it's at. There is obviously, you can ask Emily various questions about the co-design steering group and the reasons behind the scheme. So I'll brush over those. Tanya's described where the site is. You've seen that. It fronts onto Upper Tollington Park, which is a secondary road off of Stroud Green Road Junction. Stroud Green Road itself frontage isn't in the conservation area, but the Upper Tollington Park, Victoria Terrace and Perth Road sites are all within the conservation area. So we overlook those 3 frontages. You can see some aerial views of the site. There is an existing care home on the site, which you can see. It's a 2-storey development with a very steep pitched roof on it, and at the front of the site there's a clinic. You can see that from various directions. And that gives various views. I won't go through those now, they're all in the design and access statement that's been prepared. You can see the conservation area in pink at the top of the aerial view at the top with the site highlighted in red. This has got various views into the site. The existing site has an entrance at the Stroud Green Road end of the site, and you'll see in the scheme that we've maintained that entrance through there. These are all supporting conservation areas. We've consulted with the planning department and the conservation officer at length throughout this process. We've probably had up to 15 to 20 pre-application discussions. As Tanya said, it's been to a QRP panel twice, and we've got the feedback from all of those. We have a heritage and conservation architect in our team as part of that, and there's been ongoing discussions between everybody, and you'll see that reflected in the quality of the design. This is a conservation area assessment, which again, I won't go through. Actually, that's quite an interesting view. This is a historical map of the site. It's called Osborne Grove Care Home because there was Osborne Grove as a cul-de-sac. The terraced housing went all the way along the front. These were slightly grander villas on the front. They're 2.5 stories, you can see by the steps that came out to the frontage. And there was
Okay, we're back. Oh. So can you remember what you...
I think so, yeah. Okay, that gave you a brief history of the consultation and all the stakeholder engagement that we've been through on the project. It's been quite intense. I'll just run through the scheme now. This is the existing site plan. You can see the care home itself and the clinic at the front. It's important to note that at the top of the site there is a gas governor. This is right on the north corner. That gas governor is owned by Cadent. It doesn't impact on the site at all. It doesn't feed gas to the site, but it does look after the rest of the district. We would have liked to have lost it off the site so we could have continued the terrace all the way along, but unfortunately that's had to be contained, and we've tried to incorporate it within the design as much as possible. You'll see that the main entrance into the site, a vehicle entrance through to the parking and delivery access, is to the east part of the site, facing onto Upper Tollington Park, and the entrance to the existing care home is through a gateway at this end, and it comes through. You'll see on the site also that there are 3 trees at the back of the site here on the boundary line. They are category 3 sycamore trees. They really are not good quality and in need of a lot of maintenance. We are proposing to remove those trees. The rest on the site are ornamental trees, so we quite easily are removing those. The one tree on the frontage of the site here is a maple tree. It's a category 2 tree, but it's right on the boundary, and it's currently impacting on the pavement and the boundary walls. And on our future scheme, you'll see that actually it impacts right on the main entrance of the scheme. So our proposal has been to remove these trees and to plant a lot more to mitigate that purpose. Here we go. This is a site location plan, so you can see how the new care home fits into the site with that north corner wrapping around the gas governor. I'll zoom in on that site plan. You can see that the proposal is to maintain the vehicular access at this end. You can see the new trees all around the edges of the site. It's let's call it a donut-shaped building with a central courtyard. And that is for the safety and security and dignity of the residents of the home, to enable them to get outside. That's how the building breaks down. There are 3 dementia households, 1 complex nursing care household, physical frailty, intermediate care, and autism and learning difficulty household. Those are on the lower ground floors. The green floor at the top of the house is for end-of-life homeless studio flats, and the blue area to the front of the building and to the northeast side on the top floor there are the sheltered housing units, and I'll explain how those are broken up. This is the ground floor plan in relation to the rest of the site. There's the gas governor. We have to keep 2 meters away from that, both in building terms and in construction terms as well, for vibration purposes. Main entrance to the home is here. This is the main reception area. This whole frontage is very much a public-facing part of the household. There's a community cafe which is shared by residents, family members. Community can drop in, have a cup of coffee, mix in with the residents, and then a day centre at the back again, which again is a mixed facility, generally for the use of the care home, but also can have community events in it. And then you have a secure line round about this area here, which is safe access only to the rear of the building. The vehicular access is down here. It's a zero parking site. There's no requirement for parking. We do have four car parking spaces here, and those are for relatives to be able to discreetly come into the home and, if necessary, see their family members. This is a turning bay for an ambulance. This is in an undercroft of the building on the ground floor here. This again is for discreet entry and access out of the care home from that point. It's also the servicing and the staff entry into the building. Staff would come into this area. They would enter this ground floor area with their changing facilities and access this staircase and lift from here. That's for infection control reasons, so they change out from their outdoor clothes to their working clothes inside. Bin store is on this corner, access from inside and then outside. This is a fire path. The fire tender can turn in this space as well. And these are both these two stairs are fire stairs. And it's intended that refuse lorries would pull in at the front of the entrance, empty directly from the bin store, dwell there for as little time as possible, and get away. The design of the care home has been based on a household of 10 bedroom units. You can see there are 10 there. There's then a central dining space and living space with a nurse's station in the middle. I'll explain that later in a bit more detail, but you can see two 10-bed units there. These are support spaces down the side with hairdressing, with multi-faith rooms, with work areas. And the corners of the building have activity rooms that residents can go into and carry out various activities during the day. As I say, below that undercroft, there's a basement area, stairs down to both ends. There is a cycle store in the bottom for staff. There's cycle provision as well within that parking area you saw. But the main use of this is for backup generator and sprinkler tanks and sprinkler booster pumps, big heavy plant area. So that's gone in the basement, so it doesn't have to sit on upper floors. And that's limited to that. It's also easier to access. There are ground source heat pumps all in the courtyard area, and they access into the back of that plant area. Above that, first floor, 3 households. I'll explain the households later. This is very much the servicing area. This is an industrial kitchen, changing spaces for the kitchen. Food is cooked in here fresh for the residents and is trolleyed out to each of the households to the dining areas and distributed from there. There's a laundry space at the back as well. All the washing and ironing is done, and drying, everything is done on site. Staff areas, the back here from staff room, etc. And this is a drop-in office centre. It's very much a sharing space. Residents can walk round in a circle round the house, and we've got windows alongside the kitchen and the work areas and the laundry, so the residents can interact and see what's going on in those areas. Important part of the design. 2 more households on the floor, and then the sheltered housing units are coming in on this floor. Sheltered housing units are 1-bedroom flats, essentially, transition areas. There's a couple of terraces here. This is an autism household, and they've got their own terrace, and the sheltered houses have got their own terrace to enjoy a bit of outdoor activity as well. That's the 3-storey element along the back. So you've got roof space around there, more sheltered housing, and then these are the end-of-life homeless flats. They've got their own lift and entrance from the ground floor, so they can access their floor separately as an individual, on an individual basis. Each of the roofs are bio-solar roofs, so it's green roofs throughout, but they've got PVs on top as well. So we've got biodiversity, rain attenuation on the roof, and power generation. We've been through many iterations on how the elevational treatment of this would complement the conservation area, and you can see we had a 4-storey frontage. We've been all through all sorts of different methods. Worked very closely with Elisabetta, and now we have a 3-storey solution to the front with a setback roof. It's all brickwork. It's all intended to be off-site construction. And it's been exquisitely detailed, if you like, in consultation with pilasters and dental courses, and window proportions have all been worked out, with brickwork detailing and soldier courses going around the building, and that is carries on all the way around the building. You can see the gas governor at the front here. That has been dressed around in a similar manner to the main building, so that at the moment it's just a close boarded timber fence around it. It looks a right mess, so we've tried to incorporate that into the design.
Can you just wind up, please?
Oh, okay. I can emphasise the details. You've got air plans and elevations, interior quality. I was going to explain the households as well, because it's intrinsic to the design, how these households work, the supervision and surveillance of the residents, and they don't have to move more than 8 metres to get from their bedroom door into that central area. So that's key to the design, and I was going to go through all the elements of how it's got to that. Sustainability, that's the most important part to just finalise on. Off-site construction, detail in the fabric, high insulation, ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, PV. We are achieving, we'd like to get to a zero carbon solution. We'd love to have done to that. But this building has to be maintained at 25 degrees, 365 days of the year. So we are using the thermal mass of the building to control that temperature. We are 69% above building regs requirements at this present time. So it's done its best to get as far as we can push it, given the amount of roof space we've got to put PVs on and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got Councillor Dunstall first, please.
Yeah, thank you. Couple of points. Firstly, on the existing health centre, which I believe is a specialist health centre. I read at 7.9 that, 7.9, somewhere within that, that the other local boroughs have suggested that there is enough capacity in their services. I'm just wondering where those services are, and also that we're looking at alternative locations for them. One more
can I answer one at a time? Is that okay? So the current service that's been provided there is provided by an external provider called the British Pregnancy Association, and the provision can be provided elsewhere in NCL. When we were talking about NCL ICB, that's the new joint up CCGs. So the provision is commissioned across the 5. We're looking for an alternative venue in Haringey, so that work's being undertaken. However, if we did need to move into the building before they were able to find something, there is sufficient capacity across Camden, Islington. There's also provision in Enfield as well.
Just come back on that. Obviously, it's quite specialist and sensitive provision that has also been subject to some quite unpleasant kind of protests and stuff like that. It would be a real shame to lose that provision in the borough. That.
So we did consider rehousing within the site, and we did consider rejoining, re-providing within the new building. However, when we looked at the kind of business case, it didn't really stack up. And also, one of the kind of key defining features of the co-design of this building has been about bringing the nursing home to into its community. At the moment, the current building is quite set back and it's not connected to its community. So if you can imagine being somebody who is in a nursing home environment, you're unable to leave the building, to never see anybody from your local community, never have the opportunity. It's quite a challenge. So we really wanted, one of the kind of right from the first meeting that we had with our co-design members was to bring that building to the front so that we could make that connection with the local community.
And sorry, just the other stuff is to do with trees. you cited 2 mature sycamores and a maple. The sycamores, you've said, are not in good condition. Can we expand upon that? And also, the maple is damaging the street. In essence, we don't want to be removing mature trees, especially with regard kind of maple, if it's just about an entrance point. We want to be maintaining mature trees, especially in Stroud Green, where there's strength of feeling about that.
Okay, we've been through this conversation quite a lot, because obviously that maple tree is there at the front of the building. As I say, it is impacting on the foundations of both the pavement and the external, the wall of the site. It is also, there are 3 trees currently in the pavement, as you'd expect down a London street, and it's integrated itself within that tree as well. And we have looked at all sorts of ways of perhaps moving the entrance of the design to perhaps mitigate that tree, but we'd have to push the building back by something like 5 meters to incorporate it, which means another recess in the building, which took away from the street frontage and fitting in with the street scene of the terraced housing. So we've looked at each and every way possible to try and retain that tree. I think that the agreement, and we've spoken to your tree officer as well, is that the best thing we can do is plant some semi-mature trees all around the site. Would actually add to the site, add to the enjoyment of the residents, but also add to the screening around the site in the right locations to do that.
Go on.
Very briefly, last one. And the sycamores at the back, you said that
sycamores at the back are really in a bad.
If we had that looked at and
assessed. Yeah, they're leaning over. They're in bad condition. They've got ivy growing up them, and they're right on the boundary. They're half in our site, half in the adjacent site, if you like. We need to secure the site, so we need to put a new boundary fencing around, and it is much better to put, it's thought the sycamores aren't great anyway for the site. They're not particularly attractive or anything. These are just strips of wood sticking up at the moment. So it's much better to try and replace those with much more appropriately positioned and species of trees.
In response, we have had a full arboricultural report that identifies their condition. So, yeah, we can share that.
All right. Councillor Say?
Yeah, you said it's being constructed off-site and presumably assembled on-site. Can you say why you've gone for that kind of construction, and also how long it's going to take once you've got
the construction? Yeah. Yes, I think there's a desire by Haringey Council themselves to have as much modern method of construction and construction off-site for reducing wastage of materials, all that sort of thing. The site itself is very constrained. To be able to bring materials onto site, store them, mix concrete, mix mortar, etc., would be really difficult to maintain and would cause a lot of noise, vibration and dust and all sorts of things. It's much cleaner to have everything made off-site. The precast element of the framework itself can be put together much quicker. Pre-orders and upfront time is more important. But also you can maintain the quality off-site as well. The facade panels would be craned in and put against the thing, and they'd have the windows already in place, the brickwork detailing already in place. It's a much cleaner, less wastage operation.
How long?
Oh, how long? We are anticipating a 22-month contract period. It would be a lot longer if you were going to have in situ concrete poured on site and brickwork laid traditionally and that sort of thing.
Okay, so Councillor Buxton, who else had the hand up? Councillor White. Okay, Councillor Buxton.
I don't know how far I stretch. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so, that's the right word. My question being, is it a car-free development? Because I note that you had 4 blue badge spaces. However, the way that you presented it was that it was for visitors to come and see. Is it? Yeah.
So this is a nursing facility, so there will be occasions when family members need to come up very quickly to see their loved ones if they're reaching end of life. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to have the provision on the site for people to be able to park quickly, efficiently, but we don't want it to be like every time you come to see your mum, you can park there. So that's the reason why we've made them disabled based in particular, because then we can only use them in case of emergencies. But what we wouldn't want to do is for a family member who's obviously distraught coming to see their mum or their dad or their auntie or uncle at the end of their life, missing that because they're trying to find parking down the road. So essentially that was our thinking around it. Does that make? Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor White, go on.
Yeah, thanks. Mine was just very, very quick. You didn't have time to tell us about the household situation, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about that now.
Go on, Clive.
So essentially, we've created the home around we've done a lot of studies into good quality care homes. So we've looked at the sizes of different households, and the premium number is between 8 and 12 beds per household. So we've got 10, which is right in the middle of that number. But what we've done is, I don't know if Trevor can bring it up, is we've cited the kind of communal facilities, so lounges and dining rooms, at the centre of those households, which means that if you're in one of the bedrooms, the furthest away from those communal areas, they are actually only 8 metres away. So if you're fairly mobile, if you have some mobility, you're not in a wheelchair, it actually encourages independence and movement if the areas that you have to walk are fairly short. And what we've done is, if you can see, you can't really see in these images very well, but the angles of the corridors are splayed. And what that does is improve vision for nursing staff. So this nursing staff kind of pod is located, Dave will point to it, is located right in that central area, and nurses will have lines of sight all the way down. So in terms of reducing risk of falls when people are coming out of their bedrooms at night, disorientated, things like that, we're really trying to minimise those kind of safeguarding risks. Yeah, they also call it passive. In terms of dementia-friendly design, it's passive location as well. So actually, you'll generally go to the bits if you're somebody with dementia, you'll actually come out of your bedroom and actually head towards the bits of the corridor where they go wider, because that's the sense of you're actually going to somewhere important.
Sorry, on the dementia side, we've collaborated really closely with University of Stirling in their DHDA unit, who will audit this scheme, but actually they've audited the design in advance and have been very supportive and accepting of it as it is. So that's very positive for us.
Thank you. Councillor Colley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, 4 points. First, on the design, I do find it a bit flat, I have to say, but at the same time quite imposing. It's so close to the pavement. It's ahead of the line of all the, the terraces. So I'm just wondering why you haven't continued that line rather than bringing it forward and making it so imposing, because it's a big building, width-wise, and why you haven't introduced the simplicity of the other buildings on the street. Simplicity, but obviously the beautiful design of them as well, and the contrast and all that sort of thing. It feels like, I know you talked about detailing. For me, it feels flat, and it feels like a lot of that is missing, and perhaps a more blended design might feel a little bit less oppressive. That's point one. Second, so I don't know a lot about these sorts of facilities. There's obviously a real mix of different needs going into this one building. Is that commonplace? Is there a conflict at all? That would be fairly normal, would it? And third point, is, feels like there's going to be quite a lot of residents. I can't remember the exact number. Is the courtyard space in the middle for all of them, and sort of what sense of space can they each expect? You know, will there be times they're allowed, or can anyone go out at any one point, or whatever? And then the fourth point, Osborne Grove isn't that old. The current site isn't that old, but you said it's at end of life, which is concerning. I guess you mean end of life for the use of today. How do we know that this is being future-proof? Because I'm sure when Osborne Grove went in, they thought this is a long-term no. So perhaps a little bit of background on that would be useful. Thanks.
I can refer you to the Cabinet decision in 2019, which goes into a lot of detail about why we wouldn't keep the existing building. So primarily, the building was never designed to be a nursing home. It was designed to be a residential respite facility for people with dementia. So it was only ever meant for short-term stays. So there's a lot of kind of fundamentals in the building that just aren't quite right. Bedroom sizes, for example, are really small. They only have ensuite toilet facilities. They don't have ensuite bathrooms. The assisted bathrooms are not really fit for purpose. We also have lifts that only will take a wheelchair. They won't, so they're person lifts rather than bed lifts, which from a kind of care quality perspective, we were never able to get a CQC rating above requires improvement. And a lot of that was around fire, escaping in the case of the fire. In case of a fire, there were actually examples with people who were living on the first floor of the building, actually having to be manually hoisted 4 times to get them into an ambulance because of the way that the doors and the lifts worked. So it just didn't work as a nursing home. So when we did the feasibility study, we looked at lots of different options and retaining the building, but changing the internals we did consider. However, this building was not built to withstand progressive collapse. And what that means is it couldn't be used as a nursing, it should never have been used as a nursing facility. So basically the entirety of that beautiful, huge roof that it has is full of wood. So in the case of a fire, it is literally a nightmare in terms of compartmentalisation of the building. And where you have patients who are palliative, so bed bound, you must have means to have those to have progressive collapse of the building so that you can move people around the building in a kind of safe way before the fire brigades get there and they're able to take people out of the building safely.
About the design.
In terms of the front line of the building, that image is slightly deceptive in that it makes it look as though it comes forward. And that's because of the big recess around the gas governor. The building line is actually only just under 2 meters forward of those buildings, and it's thought to be on the historic line. As I said, the terraced houses that were at that position previously were slightly grander as they moved down the street, and the buildings nearer to Stroud Green Road project out even further. So it's a progressive projection out towards the streets. In terms of flatness, if you want to call it that, the terrace down the road are very flat elevations, apart from the ground floor, which have the bay windows on them, and we've.
Visually, in that detail, contrast and that sort of thing.
There is contrast. You can't quite see it. There is banding of contrasting.
Slide there, isn't there, with further details, and we've got that slide that picks out some of those elements.
Yeah, you can see how that's built up in that slide there. So there are contrasting bands going across in. They're not stonework, but they're reconstituted stone to sort of match. So we went into this very, very carefully with Elisabetta to get the best solution that we could possibly do in terms of quality of detailing that doesn't not pastiche of the terracing, but it complements it and works with it in the best way that it can.
Okay, thank you.
You can see the proportions. The proportions very much match the rhythm of the street scene. So the bays, the 8-meter bays, are typical of the width of a terraced house down the street seen as well.
Okay, and there's an outside space and resident mix.
Yeah. So in terms of resident mix, generally most care homes that we're using, they're in the private sector, so they have to maximise bed spaces, which of course we will be aiming to do. But what we've tried to do within this provision is just ensure that we've got provision for the placements that we're unable to make. So where we've talked about specific dementias, at the moment we're placing residents as far afield as Croydon in for specialist dementia, so that those are kind of not your Alzheimer's but your Korsakoff syndromes and more complex dementias. So what we wanted to do, and it may be that over time that you do get more of a blend of people, but it's about protecting for different user groups. We've specifically designed a household for people with learning disabilities, and that was one of the kind of key defining. There isn't provision in London, and we've got an ageing population of people with learning disabilities, especially in Haringey, where people are living for longer. They have more complex health conditions at the end of life, but also their parents pass away or their parents become more elderly and infirm. So where they probably would have previously cared for them for individuals at home, it's not always possible now. So at the moment we have a number of people in nursing home placements, but they're not specialists. And what we want to do is create something really innovative and different. We do have the what's been described as homelessness household. What that is something quite different as well. So we have people with complex homeless issues, but also perhaps with more complex lifestyle issues who become frailer earlier in age. So actually we're talking about people probably in their 40s and 50s, but they have a whole plethora of kind of complexities around their health and perhaps around their kind of lifestyles. So what we're trying to do there is create a really innovative new unit where it will provide nursing care, but it will also reflect the needs of the individuals, and it will prevent us from having to provide inappropriate place for people at end of life, but also in recovery as well from coming out of hospital for those groups.
Okay, and then yeah, I was just going to say the outside space quickly.
Oh yeah, sorry, outside spaces. So the outside space will be open to all residents, bar those on the in the homelessness unit who have their own, who will have their own space, but they're more likely to be mobile and leaving the home and going outside the home. Within the home, we've got lots of different areas. So we've got the main courtyard area, but on the peripherals of the building, you'll see there's some really nice little quiet zones, and that's both for residents and staff, because actually sometimes staff need a break and need to go and sit somewhere quiet and get over something that's happened and that they've had to deal with. So we've been really conscious about having a mixture of both the courtyard space, which has both community functions and exercise functions, but also having those quiet spaces where people can go and be peaceful, reflect. And that's both on the ground, that's both on the lower levels, and on the upper levels we've got small courtyards as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, all right, so I think you've covered all of the points. Thank you very much for staying so late as well. So okay, so moving on then, we're on item 12, which is update on major proposals. That's to pages 317 to 332, and that's to note. Any questions? No. Okay, so item 13 is applications determined under delegated powers, and that's pages 333 to 436. Any questions on that? Do you want to say anything? Any questions on that? No? Okay. So there are no new items of urgent business. So we're on to date of the next meeting, and that is the 7th of November. So close the meeting, and thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.